Young millionaire married a homeless girl in panic to escape his family's plan, unaware she was the heiress they feared. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The night rain drummed softly against the roof of a small chapel tucked between two high-rise buildings in downtown Manhattan. The lights inside flickered weakly, painting long shadows across the empty pews. Ethan Ward, the 29-year-old heir to Ward Industries, stood near the altar with water dripping from his dark hair onto his tailored suit. His phone kept vibrating in his hand, the screen flashing his father's name over and over again. He let it ring. He could already hear his father's voice in his mind. "You will marry Eleanor Pierce by sunrise, or the merger is dead." Ethan exhaled sharply. The word marriage used to sound like a promise. Tonight, it sounded like a prison sentence. The heavy wooden door creaked open behind him, and a gust of cold air rushed in. A woman stepped inside, shaking rain from her threadbare coat. She was young, maybe mid-20s, her hair damp and tangled. In her arms, she held a small cardboard box with a worn-out blanket folded on top. Her shoes were soaked, leaving wet footprints on the stone floor. "Sorry," she murmured, startled when she saw him standing there. "I thought this place was empty." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. The exhaustion, the defiance, the faint tremor in her hands as she tried to hide how cold she was. "It is," he said quietly, "or at least it was." She gave an awkward smile and walked toward one of the side pews. "I just needed a roof for a few minutes. It was either this or the subway." He nodded slowly. "You are not from around here." She glanced up. "Does it matter?" Ethan almost smiled. "Not really." He hesitated, then asked, "Do you believe in strange timing?" She frowned. "Like fate?" "Something like that," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled paper, the same document he had spent the last hour drafting in the hotel lobby next door. A marriage contract. It was desperate, reckless, and completely unthinkable, but it was his only way out. He took a slow step closer. "I need help, and you look like someone who could use a miracle." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "That depends on the kind of help you are talking about." He swallowed hard. "Marry me, tonight, just for a month." "Oh." The silence that followed was thick enough to hear the rain dripping from the ceiling. She blinked at him, convinced it was a cruel joke. "You are kidding." "I am not," he said. "I need a wife before sunrise, no strings attached. You will be paid well, and when the time is over, you can walk away, no questions asked." Her mouth parted slightly. "You do not even know my name." Ethan looked at her steadily. "Then tell me." She hesitated before whispering, "Lila." He nodded once. "Lila, I am Ethan." Lila shifted the cardboard box nervously in her hands. "Why me?" He gave a small, tired laugh. "Because you are here, because you are not one of them." "One of who?" she asked. "The people who already think they own me." For a moment they just stared at each other. The storm outside howled louder, echoing through the chapel walls. Finally, Lila shook her head. "You must be out of your mind. People do not just marry strangers." "Maybe not," Ethan said quietly, "but people do desperate things when they are cornered." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a simple silver ring, nothing fancy, just something he had grabbed from the front desk gift shop hours earlier. It glinted faintly under the chapel light. Lila looked at it, then at him, still unsure if this was insanity or destiny. "And what do you get out of this?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "A way to say no to a life I do not want, and maybe a chance to breathe for once." Her fingers brushed the wet cardboard box again, thinking of her mother still waiting at the shelter clinic, her medication running out. "1 month?" she asked softly. "1 month," he confirmed. "You will have everything you need. Then you walk away free." The clock above the altar ticked once, breaking the silence. Lila stared at him for a long moment, then took a deep breath. "Fine," she whispered. "But if this is a trick, I swear." "It is not," Ethan interrupted, his tone almost pleading. "It is just survival." Lila stepped closer, the dim candlelight catching the shimmer of rain still clinging to her lashes. She held out her hand. "Then let us survive together." Ethan slid the ring onto her finger. It was too loose, but it stayed. In that small, empty chapel at the edge of the city, two strangers stood side by side, one running from a gilded cage, the other from the cold streets outside. Neither of them knew that this reckless deal would expose more than lies. It would uncover a truth powerful enough to change both their lives forever. "Love Millionaire," 29 foot said. The chapel was quiet except for the echo of their footsteps. The storm outside had softened into a misty drizzle by the time Ethan and Lila stepped out. His car waited under the streetlight, black and sleek against the wet pavement. He opened the passenger door for her, and she hesitated before sliding in, her small box of belongings clutched tightly to her chest. They drove through the empty streets in silence. The hum of the engine filled the space between them, the air thick with disbelief. Lila watched the neon reflections ripple across the car window, her breath fogging the glass. "You really are serious about this," she finally said, half to herself. Ethan's voice was calm, almost too calm. "I am. The courthouse opens at 6. We will be first in line." She let out a soft laugh, but it sounded more like a sigh. "So that is it. I walk into a storm as a homeless girl and walk out someone's wife before sunrise." He glanced at her. "No one has to know the truth. This is only for 1 month." 1 month," she repeated quietly, as if trying to convince herself that it was possible to measure her life in such a small amount of time. When they arrived at his apartment, she froze at the sight. It was not just an apartment, it was an entire floor, surrounded by glass walls and filled with the quiet hum of the city below. Everything looked too clean, too expensive, too untouched. "You live here alone?" she asked. "For now," he said, unlocking the door. "You can stay in the guest room. We will get you proper clothes tomorrow. The press will not believe our story if you still look like—" He stopped himself. Lila finished his sentence with a small smile. "Like I live on the street?" Ethan looked guilty. "That is not what I meant." "Yes, it is," she said softly, setting her box on the marble floor. "But do not worry. I have heard worse." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan turned toward his desk, pulling out the same crumpled paper from earlier. "We need to sign this before anything else," he said. Lila walked closer and saw the contract again, now slightly smoothed, but still stained by rain. There were 4 clauses written neatly in pen. The marriage will last 1 month only. Both parties will keep all personal matters private. Public appearances must appear genuine. No emotional involvement. She read each line slowly, then looked up at him. "You really think emotions can be written out of a contract?" Ethan met her eyes. "They have to be. Emotions complicate everything." Lila's lips curved into a faint smile. "That sounds like something a man with a lot to lose would say." He handed her a pen. "Just sign it, Lila. After this month, you will not have to deal with me again." She took the pen, hesitated for only a second, and signed. Her handwriting looked small and careful beneath his bold signature. "There, we are officially strangers with a marriage license," she said, trying to lighten the tension. Ethan placed the papers into a folder and locked it away in his drawer. "You should rest. The wardrobe room is to your right. Take whatever you need." When she entered the guest room, she paused at the door. The bed looked softer than any she had seen in years. There were fresh linens, soft towels, and a window that framed the glittering skyline. For a moment, she forgot where she came from. In the other room, Ethan loosened his tie and stared at the city through the glass wall. His phone buzzed again, his father's name flashing on the screen. He ignored it. Instead, he opened the small drawer where he had kept his late mother's wedding band. He had used it as a prop, but holding it now brought back a sharp ache. He looked toward the hallway where Lila had disappeared. Something about her quiet strength unsettled him. She was nothing like the women he had known. There was no calculation in her eyes, no practiced charm, just exhaustion and truth. Meanwhile, Lila sat on the edge of the bed, the silver ring still loose around her finger. She turned it slowly under the lamplight. It felt strange, wearing something that symbolized a promise neither of them believed in. She opened her small notebook and wrote a single line. 1 month of pretending, then freedom. Outside, the rain began again, soft against the windows. In different rooms, they both stared at the ceiling, wondering what exactly they had agreed to. For Ethan, it was supposed to be a transaction. For Lila, a temporary escape. But somewhere between the written rules and the unspoken truths, a story much bigger than either of them had already begun. The next morning, The city shimmered under a thin veil of fog. Ethan was already awake, standing by the window with a cup of black coffee in his hand. He had barely slept, his thoughts tangled between guilt and relief. Across the hallway, Lila stirred awake to the unfamiliar scent of expensive soap and freshly brewed coffee drifting through the air. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The softness of the sheets, the muted hum of the city far below it, all felt like a dream borrowed from someone else's life. Then she saw the silver ring still on her finger and remembered everything. When she stepped into the kitchen, Ethan was reading emails on his tablet, dressed in a crisp suit. He looked up briefly. "Good morning," he said, his voice even but distant. "Morning," she replied, glancing around the pristine kitchen. The counters gleamed. Everything looked untouched. "Do you ever actually use this place?" Ethan gave a small shrug. "Not really. My assistant keeps it ready in case guests come over, which they never do." Lila half smiled. "Then I guess I am your first guest. Technically, my wife," he said without looking up. The words made her pause. She did not know whether to laugh or roll her eyes. A quiet moment passed before he spoke again. "We have a busy day. The courthouse at 10, wardrobe fitting at noon, and my father's press dinner tomorrow night." Her eyebrows rose. "You mean I have to attend that too?" "Yes," he said. "People already know I got married. They will expect to see you." Lila folded her arms. "I thought we were keeping this quiet." He sighed. "In my world, nothing stays quiet for long. The best way to control the story is to play along." That afternoon, a team of stylists arrived, 2 women and 1 impatient man with a measuring tape. They surrounded Lila, fluttering around her like a small storm. Fabrics, heels, makeup palettes, they moved quickly, transforming her reflection in the mirror into someone unrecognizable. Ethan watched from the doorway, his expression unreadable. When the final touch was done, Lila stood there in a fitted dress, the color of champagne, her hair pulled back neatly, her eyes lined softly with gold. The stylist clapped his hands. "She looks perfect, elegant, mysterious, a touch of humility, exactly what the press loves." Lila turned toward Ethan. "Well, do I pass your test, Mr. Ward?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "You look convincing." She smirked. "That is one way to say pretty." Later that evening, they sat together to review the story they would tell. Ethan laid out a simple script. They met by chance, fell quickly in love, married privately. Lila's past would remain vague. "The less you say, the easier it will be to protect you," he said. She looked at him, studying the man who had dragged her from the rain into this glittering cage. "You talk about protection, as if it is the same thing as control," she said softly. He did not answer. Instead, he closed the folder and stood. "You should rest. Tomorrow night will be difficult." When she returned to her room, Lila stared at her reflection for a long time. The woman in the mirror wore silk and diamonds, but her eyes still carried the same fatigue from the streets. She traced the edge of the ring again, that simple band of silver. It was too plain for this world, but maybe that was why she liked it. Somewhere down the hall, Ethan leaned against his office door, loosening his tie. The echo of her voice lingered in his head. "You talk about protection as if it is the same thing as control." For the first time in years, someone had said something to him that he could not ignore. And deep down, though he would never admit it, Ethan Ward was starting to feel something he had promised himself he would never feel again: doubt. The next evening arrived faster than either of them expected. The Ward Industries charity gala filled the Grand Marlowe Hotel with the sound of string music and murmured conversation. Dozens of journalists waited near the marble staircase, cameras flashing at every arrival. Ethan stood at the bottom step, his expression calm, composed, and unreadable. When Lila appeared at the top of the stairs, the noise seemed to fade for a moment. She wore a long black gown that shimmered under the lights, simple but elegant. The diamond pendant around her neck caught the light like a small star. She hesitated for half a second, gripping the railing, before Ethan extended his hand toward her. "Ready?" he asked quietly. "Not even close," she replied, forcing a small smile, but she took his hand anyway. Together, they walked into the blinding field of flashbulbs. Reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Ward, is this your new wife? How did you meet? Was it love at first sight?" Ethan gave the same practiced smile his publicist had taught him. "Yes, this is my wife, Lila. We met by accident, and sometimes accidents are just destiny." Lila blinked at him. He said it so easily, so convincingly, she almost believed it herself. Inside the ballroom, the chandeliers glowed like constellations. Waiters moved between tables carrying trays of champagne. Lila tried to stay near Ethan, but the crowd quickly pulled them apart. People surrounded him, shaking hands, exchanging business cards, flattering smiles. She stood by the dessert table, invisible but oddly relieved. A familiar voice startled her. "You must be the mystery wife." Lila turned. A woman with perfect posture and a sharper smile extended her hand. "Eleanor Pierce," she said smoothly. "We were old friends." Lila recognized the name instantly. The woman Ethan was supposed to marry. "Nice to meet you," Lila said politely. Eleanor's eyes glided over her dress, her hair, her shoes. "You are not what I expected." Lila tilted her head. "That is funny. Neither was he." "Oh." For a moment, Eleanor's smile faltered. Then she leaned closer and whispered, "Enjoy it while it lasts, dear. The ward men have a history of changing their minds." Before Lila could respond, Ethan appeared beside her, his tone firm. "Eleanor, good to see you still enjoy stirring trouble." Eleanor's laugh was light, but her eyes were sharp. "Just being friendly, Ethan. You always had a weakness for charity cases." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And you always had a weakness for power." "Ugh." She smiled sweetly, turning to Lila one last time. "Good luck keeping up with him." Then she walked away, leaving behind a faint trail of expensive perfume and tension. Lila looked up at Ethan. "Is she right?" she asked quietly. "About what?" "About you changing your mind." He met her gaze for a long moment. "Not about this," he said. Later that night, when the crowd gathered for speeches, the master of ceremonies invited the newlyweds to the stage. Lila felt her pulse quicken as she stood beside Ethan, facing hundreds of eyes. The microphone was cold in her hand. She forced herself to smile. "I am not used to speaking in front of people like this," she began, her voice slightly trembling. "But I guess love sometimes finds us in the strangest places, even on a rainy night when you have nowhere to go." The room fell quiet. Her honesty cut through the noise, through the pretense. Ethan turned to look at her, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. She continued softly, "Sometimes people lose everything except their dignity, and that is enough to start over." Applause filled the room. It was not polite, it was real. For a brief moment, Ethan felt something shift inside him, something he could not quite name. As the music swelled and the crowd applauded, he realized she had done what no one else had ever done in his world of contracts and negotiations. She made truth sound beautiful. After the applause faded, the rest of the evening unfolded in a blur of polite smiles and whispered, "Congratulations." Cameras flashed, glasses clinked, and laughter filled the ballroom. But for Ethan and Lila, the noise felt distant. They moved together like two people performing a dance they had only learned yesterday. When the crowd began to thin, Ethan guided her toward the balcony overlooking the city. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain from the storm the day before. Far below, the city lights shimmered like a sea of tiny stars. Lila leaned on the railing, rubbing her arms for warmth. "You did well tonight?" Ethan said quietly. She smiled faintly. "So did you. You almost looked like you were enjoying yourself." "Almost," he admitted. "You handled the press better than I expected." "I grew up learning to read people," she said. "It helps when you are trying to survive." Ethan glanced at her, curious. "Survive what?" "Life," she replied simply, her tone calm but heavy with unspoken stories. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was not uncomfortable anymore. It was thoughtful, almost familiar. Ethan finally broke it. "What you said in your speech, about dignity, that was not in the script." Lila looked at him, her eyes steady. "Neither was meeting you." He exhaled, almost laughing at her courage. "You are not like anyone I have ever met." She tilted her head. "That sounds like a compliment and a warning at the same time." "It might be both." He watched her for a long moment, the golden light from the ballroom framing her face. She was different from the people who usually surrounded him. No hidden agenda, no rehearsed charm, just quiet honesty. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Go ahead." "Heather, why did you say yes that night?" Lila hesitated, then answered softly, "Because I had nothing left to lose. And maybe, deep down, I wanted to believe that something good could come out of desperation." Ethan nodded slowly. "I understand that more than you think." Before she could reply, the sound of footsteps approached. It was Eleanor again, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Oh, there you two are. Everyone was wondering where the golden couple disappeared to." Lila straightened, her polite smile returning. "Just getting some air." Eleanor's gaze shifted between them, her smirk widening. "Careful, dear. Fresh air can be dangerous. It makes people honest." She turned to Ethan. "Your father was looking for you earlier. He does not seem thrilled about your sudden marriage." "I am sure he will recover," Ethan said evenly. "Will he?" she asked, her tone sharp beneath the surface. "You might want to remind him before he decides to cut you off." "Oh." Ethan's expression hardened. "Good night, Eleanor." She laughed lightly, the sound echoing as she walked away. Lila watched her leave, then looked back at Ethan. "She is enjoying this." "She always does," he said. "Do not let her get to you." "I will not," Lila replied, but the tension lingered in her eyes. A waiter stepped outside, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. "Compliments of the host," he said, setting them down. Lila picked up 1 glass, twirling it gently between her fingers. "To surviving the first public test," she said. Ethan smiled faintly. "To surviving each other." They clinked glasses, and for the first time, their laughter sounded genuine. Later that night, when they returned to the penthouse, Lila kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the couch. "You rich people throw exhausting parties," she murmured. Ethan loosened his tie and laughed quietly. "That was not a party. That was an inspection." She turned her head toward him. "Did we pass?" "I think we did," he said, meeting her gaze. For a long moment, the air shifted between them. The walls of formality that had defined their arrangement began to crack. Lila leaned back, her eyes half closed. "I almost forgot this marriage is fake," she whispered. Ethan's voice lowered. "So did I." The words hung in the air longer than either expected. Lila sat up quickly, brushing her hair from her face. "You should probably get some sleep, Mr. Ward. Tomorrow you will wake up and remember who you are." Ethan watched her stand and walk toward the hallway. "And who are you, Lila?" he asked softly. She stopped at the doorway, looking back at him. "Just someone passing through your world. Do not worry, I will not leave footprints." She disappeared down the hall, the soft click of her door closing behind her. Ethan stayed where he was, staring at the space she had just left. For the first time, the apartment felt too quiet, too empty. He looked down at his hand, the ring that matched hers glinting faintly under the city light. What began as a contract was starting to feel dangerously close to something real, and that realization both thrilled and terrified him. "Love Millionaire como treni nueva foot," said. The days that followed were strangely quiet. The tabloids ran photos from the gala, headlines calling them the most unexpected couple of the year. Ethan ignored them, but Lila read every line, unsure whether to laugh or cry. In every picture, she looked like she belonged next to him, elegant, composed, glowing. It felt unreal. One evening, Ethan came home late from the office. The rain had returned, tapping softly against the glass walls of the penthouse. Lila sat on the couch, sketchbook in hand, her bare feet tucked beneath her. She looked up when he entered. "You are home early," she said with a small smile. "It is after 10, he replied, loosening his tie. She shrugged. "Earlier than usual, then." He poured himself a glass of water, then nodded toward her sketchbook. "What are you drawing?" She hesitated before turning it around. On the page was a rough charcoal sketch of the city skyline, except the tallest building was shaped like a heart, its reflection in the water forming the shape of a key. Ethan studied it. "That is different." "Different good or different bad?" she asked. "Different real," he said softly. Lila smiled, closing the notebook. "You talk like a man who forgot how to be real." He looked at her for a long moment. "Maybe I did." The rain grew heavier, and thunder rolled somewhere in the distance. Lila stood and walked toward the window, pressing her hand against the cool glass. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to dream about living in a place like this. But now that I am here, it feels less like a home and more like a museum. Everything beautiful, but nothing alive." Ethan joined her by the window. "It was never meant to feel like home. It was meant to feel safe." "Safe from what?" she asked, turning to face him. He hesitated. "From people who want something from me. From people who smile to my face and lie behind my back. From myself, maybe." She tilted her head. "And which one am I?" He met her gaze. "I have not decided yet." A faint smile touched her lips. You should not take too long. The contract expires in 2 weeks. Do you plan to count the days? He asked. I plan not to, she replied. A flash of lightning lit the room for a second, and when it faded, their faces were only inches apart. Ethan could smell the faint scent of her shampoo, the warmth of her skin so close. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Lila whispered, Do you always overthink everything, Ethan? Only when I am afraid of the answer, he said quietly. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to step back. Then maybe stop thinking and start feeling. It might surprise you. She walked toward her room, but before closing the door, she looked over her shoulder. And by the way, I like the real version of you better. Ethan stood frozen, her words echoing in his mind. The real version of him, he was not even sure what that meant anymore. For years, his life had been contracts, expectations, and control. But Lila, with her quiet truth and sharp honesty, was unraveling everything he thought he understood about love, trust, and freedom. When the door clicked shut, he turned back to the window. The city lights blurred through the rain, and for the first time in his life, Ethan Ward felt something he could not negotiate, buy, or control. He felt alive. 2 days passed, and the city would not stop talking. Every channel, every magazine, every gossip site was repeating the same story. The fake wife of Ethan Ward disappears after scandal. Ethan had not slept. He searched every shelter, every hotel she might have gone to, but Lila was nowhere. Then, late on the third night, a familiar voice called his office. You need to see this, his assistant said. Turn on Channel 7. Ethan did. On the screen, a local reporter stood outside a rundown community center in Queens. Behind her, a new banner read, Sinclair Foundation, Restoring Homes for the Forgotten. And there she was, Lila, standing in front of the crowd, holding a microphone with calm determination. My mother, Rose Sinclair, helped build part of the Ward Industries charity division 25 years ago, Lila said, her voice steady but emotional. But when she refused to cover up illegal labor reports, her name was erased. Everything she built was taken from her. My last name was supposed to mean something honest. Tonight, I am reclaiming it. The crowd erupted in applause. Ethan stared at the screen, frozen. Sinclair. The initials on her silver bracelet, R.S., they were her mother's name. The truth hit him like a wave. He grabbed his coat and raced out of the office. By the time he reached the center, the press was already swarming the place. Lila stood near the entrance, surrounded by flashing lights and microphones. When she saw him, she froze. Ethan, she whispered. He stepped closer, ignoring the noise, his voice low but clear. You could have told me. I tried, she said softly. But you were too busy protecting your name. I had to protect mine. The reporters shouted questions, but Ethan only looked at her. Then let us protect the truth together, he said. He turned to the cameras. My wife did not lie. She is the rightful heir to part of this company's legacy. What my father's generation buried, we will bring back into the light. The crowd gasped. Lila blinked at him, stunned. For the first time, he was not hiding behind contracts or fear. Ethan reached for her hand. No more pretending, no more deals, just the truth. And this time, she did not pull away. A year later, spring returned to New York. The Sinclair Foundation had grown beyond anyone's expectations, restoring dozens of homes and funding education programs for single mothers. Lila's name stood proudly on the building's glass entrance, right beside the Ward Industries emblem. What began as a scandal had become a story of justice and of love that no one could have predicted. Inside the foundation's art gallery, soft music played as guests admired the new exhibition titled Second Chances. Lila moved between the paintings, her smile gentle but radiant. On one wall hung a familiar piece, a charcoal sketch of the city skyline with a heart-shaped tower and a key reflected in the water. She felt a hand touch her shoulder. Still drawing keys, I see, Ethan said softly behind her. She turned, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. He wore no tie tonight, only a simple dark suit and that same silver ring that matched hers. I like the idea of doors that can still open, she said. He smiled. Then maybe it is time to open one more. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. When he knelt down, the entire room went silent. Lila's eyes widened. Ethan, he looked up at her, voice steady and full of warmth. When I asked you to marry me the first time, it was out of panic. This time, it is out of love. No contracts, no rules, no pretending, just you and me, building something real. Her eyes filled with tears, but her smile was unshakable. You know I am terrible at saying no to you, she whispered. He laughed softly. Then do not start now. Lila nodded, unable to hold back her tears. Yes, Ethan Ward. 1,000 times, yes. Oh. Applause rippled through the room as he slipped the new ring onto her finger, this one engraved with the words, "From contract to forever." Outside, the rain began to fall again, gentle and familiar, as if the city itself remembered the night everything began. Two strangers who once signed a desperate deal had rewritten their story not with ink and paper, but with truth, forgiveness, and love that no one could counterfeit. And this time, it was real.